For well over 36,000 years, the Jedi Knights have acted as the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, starting as the humble Jedi to forming the foundations of the Jedi Order we see in the prequels, and then becoming a new Jedi Order led by Luke Skywalker. Through all its trials and tribulations, the Order of the Jedi has become one of the most iconic symbols of the Star Wars galaxy. This is every single Jedi era explained. Ancient Jedi and discovery of the Force. Thousands of years before the rise of the Galactic Republic, on the planet Tython, the discovery of the Force and its abilities led to the formation of the reclusive Jedi Order. This was a group of Force users whose ultimate goal was to maintain balance. At this time, there was no such thing as the Jedi Code or any central dogma to follow. In fact, the Jedi recognized both the light and dark sides of the Force, referring to them as the Ashla and the Bogan, named after the two moons that orbited Tython. The Jedi themselves lived in harmony on their secluded world, with a society divided into scholars, scientists, warriors, and sages, each of whom worked toward a better understanding of the Force. However, close to the formation of the Galactic Republic, the Jedi Order faced a splinter when a group of Force users obsessed with the dark side led them into a conflict known as the Force Wars, which planted the seed for the true Jedi Order to begin its formation. Just as the Jedi was the precursor order to the Jedi, this dark side splinter faction would lay the foundation for what would eventually become the Sith. It's hard to imagine a Force wielder using any weapon other than a lightsaber, but during the Force Wars, lightsaber technology didn't exist, taking place 25,793 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Force Wars occurred over 10,000 years before the invention of the lightsaber. Combatants during this conflict used Force-imbued swords. These weapons were stronger and had a sharper blade than any typical metal sword, capable of cutting through most materials. Despite not being the Jedi we know from the prequel trilogy, the Ancient Order of Tython laid the foundations of the iconic space wizards we love today. The end of this iconic era marked a pivotal moment in the galaxy, setting the stage for a more disciplined order. Near the end of this era, the Jedi Order rose to become the more familiar Jedi. Unlike their precursors, the Jedi entirely rejected the dark side of the Force, opting to instead follow the Ashla exclusively. The belief of the Jedi was that surrender to emotion and passion would lead to corruption and to the dark side, something they actively avoided since the Force Wars. Thanks to the Force Wars and the perceived danger of the dark side of the Force, the Jedi created a strict code of conduct to protect their members from straying to the dark. The Jedi of this period demonstrated a greater sensitivity to the Force than their predecessors, leading to the development of some of their most iconic practices, such as the use of holocrons. The Jedi themselves weren't invested in galactic politics at the time, focusing more on philosophy and life, still sticking to the roots of the Jedi. However, the Jedi would soon transition from isolated philosophers and scientists to become public peacekeepers. Before we continue exploring the eras of the Jedi, this video is brought to you by Saber Council, the best place to get your own Jedi weapon. Right now, Saber Council is running an exclusive one-week sale for Red 5 viewers where you can get 15% off every single lightsaber in their store. Whether you're after an elegant replica of your favorite Jedi's weapon, a fully custom design, or just want something durable for dueling, Saber Council has you covered. These aren't cheap plastic toys, but premium sabers built with high-end sound, lighting effects, and multiple customization options, so you can actually feel like you're wielding a Jedi's weapon from any era. The sale only lasts for 1 week, so if you've been thinking about picking up a saber, now's the time. Click the link in the description and use the code JEDI15 at checkout to get your discount. Big thanks to Saber Council for supporting the channel. Now, let's get back to the history of the Jedi. Old Republic. The time of the Old Republic is the longest period of galactic history on record and also happens to be one of the most influential periods in Jedi history, when the Republic finally formed 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Jedi finally aligned themselves with a galaxy-spanning government body. The Jedi and Republic created a partnership for mutual defense and trade, with the Jedi becoming the guardians of peace and justice for the Republic. It was during this time specifically, around 15,500 years before the Battle of Yavin, that the first gains in research toward modern lightsaber technology were made, solidifying the role of the Jedi as protectors and defenders. The partnership with the Republic allowed the Jedi to expand rapidly. During this period, the Jedi established the Jedi High Council and standardized their training methods, creating roles within the Jedi Order such as Knights and Masters. At this time, it was also common for the Jedi High Council to meet in person on a variety of planets such as Dantooine and Telos rather than on Coruscant. This presence across the galaxy helped hold the Republic together, something lacking in the future which would eventually lead the Jedi to their eventual demise. The Jedi became involved in serious conflicts and wars during their tenure as soldiers of the Republic. Often in these conflicts, the Jedi would blur the line between defenders of justice and aggressors. Throughout this period, several Jedi fell to the dark side, including Revan and Exar Kun, due to conflicting opinions on the actions the Jedi were taking during these galactic events. During this era, Jedi would typically wear armor for protection, along with their traditional Jedi robes of various colorations. The most creativity within Jedi uniform existed during this period, with most Jedi opting for brown or tan robes, while others branched off wearing white, gray, or various other colors. Even the lightsabers reflected this time of war and conflict with exposed parts and more rugged designs, as most Jedi during the Old Republic era were born in wartime, and lightsabers were constructed with what was most familiar for a Jedi. Lightsabers were often constructed to be more rugged and militaristic, weapons for battle rather than ornate decorations and tools. This was something that would come back around the beginning of the Clone Wars. Regardless, the Jedi remained a stable foundation for the Republic. Here, the Jedi truly became known as peacekeepers, a reputation that would soon reach its peak in the next era. High Republic. The time of the High Republic was the peak of Jedi existence. Across the galaxy, unprecedented peace reigned, and with no major wars or conflicts, the Jedi could continue to focus their efforts on missions such as exploration, diplomacy, cultural exchange, and more. With the aid of the Republic, the Jedi expanded their influence far into the Outer Rim territories of the galaxy, attempting to bring order and support to these distant worlds through the use of the Jedi Service Corps. The robes of High Republic age Jedi were ornate and were almost exclusively gold and brown, reflecting the elite and almost beautiful presence of the Jedi. Even the lightsabers of the time reflected this shift from militaristic battle-oriented design to a more ornate and decorative design for show rather than for consistent use. However, the perception of the High Republic being the golden age of the Jedi led the Order to be vulnerable to their vanity. Threats arose to challenge the Jedi's perception of themselves. Enemies like the Sith, the Nihil, and the Drenger emerged from behind the ego of the Jedi and forced the religious wizards to adapt rapidly. Jedi of the High Republic era were not soldiers or generals, harkening back to the time of the Jedi Order. The Jedi of the High Republic era took back their roots as peacekeepers, though this would be the last time the Jedi were ever in balance. The end of this era of the Jedi would mark a slow descent, which would lead to their near extinction. Fall of the Jedi. Despite being called the Fall of the Jedi, it didn't start that way. This era is perhaps the most tragic and politically aggressive chapter in their history. It began during the peak of their Order's excellence, but the Jedi would soon find themselves drawn into a dark path, their vision clouded by the dark side of the Force. The deep political entanglements the Jedi were stuck in with the Republic resulted in their eventual participation in the Clone Wars. It was at this time that the Jedi took up the familiar roles of generals and warriors, compromising their own values in the name of the Republic rather than the Jedi themselves. Orchestrated by the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, playing the part of Chancellor Palpatine, the Clone Wars was the perfect disaster to break the Jedi away from their most sacred morals. Had the Jedi been forced to fight against a living, breathing military force, it's more than likely that they would not have been drawn into the conflict. However, Darth Sidious was clever, and having been the Chancellor of the Republic, had close personal relations with many Jedi, including Anakin Skywalker. These relationships and frequent meetings with members of the Jedi High Council allowed him to gain the knowledge on how to best defeat them. Using Dooku as a puppet figurehead of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, Palpatine orchestrated a separatist divergence from the Republic and plunged the galaxy into war, building an army of non-sentient droids so that the Jedi could justify their participation in a war which would drain their numbers drastically. The entire conflict weakened the Jedi and ended up reaching its climax through the execution of Order 66, which turned the Jedi's closest friends and allies against them. Nearly all Jedi were eliminated, with just a handful surviving the event. Even those survivors were never safe, hunted by a new force of dark-side agents, the Inquisitorius. The fall of the Jedi serves as the point in time where the Jedi lost both their order and their identity, forcing any survivors to undertake pseudo-names and false identities to survive, forsaking their ancient order. Dark times. For years, the Jedi lived, sulking in the shadows they once attempted to liberate. During the reign of the Galactic Empire, Jedi were hunted and killed, and even so much as being Force-sensitive could easily result in a swift and decisive death. However, rising from the ashes of the fallen Jedi Order, a young Luke Skywalker emerged. Son to Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala, Luke was raised without knowledge of the powers he was born with, along with being unfamiliar with his true lineage. As he grew under the protection of Ben Kenobi, Luke eventually learned about his father and the role of the Jedi in the galaxy. Under the guidance of Kenobi and Master Yoda, Luke began to learn the ways of the Force and work to confront who he would soon learn to be his father. Over several years, Luke Skywalker led campaigns with the Rebel Alliance, culminating in the destruction of the Galactic Empire. During these years as a Rebel commander, Luke continued to train as a Jedi with the guidance of Yoda, and at the end of the Galactic Civil War, Luke was responsible for the supposed death of Emperor Palpatine. However, at this point, Luke had become the last Jedi of a dying order and would decide to rebuild it. New Jedi Order. Luke sought to form a new Jedi Order, but rather than just rebuilding the Order exactly how it was, he wanted to form a new Jedi Order focused on learning from the failures of the Jedi's past. At a temple of his own founding, Luke began to train new students. During this time, he rediscovered lost Jedi knowledge and embraced a more personable and individualistic approach to teaching young initiates about the Jedi path. However, even Luke's Jedi Order would face its own trials with the fall of Ben Solo into the new persona of Kylo Ren. This led to the destruction of Luke's Jedi Temple and Order. However, this would just act as another stepping stone to the rebirth of the Jedi Order, as years later, a new Force-sensitive individual emerged, Rey. Having been trained by both Luke and Leia Skywalker, Rey was given the task to restore the Jedi Order. At the point of this video being published, Rey is set to lay the foundations of a new Jedi Order in an upcoming movie. But that's all we know for now. If you were a Jedi and could exist in any of the eras listed earlier, which would it be and why? Let us know in the comments.